So we have real estate god in the building. We're just gonna get right into it. I have a question for you, sir. I saw on your bio you went from a $250 triplex to $60 million in assets under management. For myself, I want to understand a little bit how you got that first deal. Why when I read the details, it seems like you only had about $2,500. So I kind of want to just break that down.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, to give some context, I went from my first deal, which was a 200K triplex that I put $2,500 into, to now $60 million AUM. And officially started my real estate private equity business 5 years ago. In the last 3 years or so, 2 or 3 years, we've 4x'd the AUM. So it's been pretty aggressive growth, and obviously looking to add to that. That first deal, and I've done all my deals in a private equity structure. So raising capital from other investors. And obviously the specific structure depends on the deal. But yeah, I've been able to do deals with as little as $2,500 down, and as much as putting in 30 to 40% of the capital stack. So it's kind of been a mix of both.
Got it. And so, from my understanding, like the conventional way, again, I'm not very nuanced in real estate. I think most people kind of go into the approach of saying, I need to take on a mortgage or this huge debt. For the average individual, how do they get involved in getting money from private equity to fund their own real estate empire?
Yeah, I mean, so like the average person, when they see $1 million deal, they think that the only option is you get a loan from the bank, usually, which is around 75%, so 750K. And then
Mhm.
they have to come up with the other 250K themselves. And that's not true, right? What you can do is you can raise capital from investors, and that could be institutional investors, it could be friends and family, could be whoever. Um, and typically in those scenarios, we only need to put in 5 to 10% of the equity. So if the equity check was 250K on $1 million deal, you're only putting in 5 to 10% of that. So call it anywhere like 25K at max. And you could put in more if you want to, but you can also put in less. I mean, you could put in $0 into a deal and roll on an acquisition fee. So there are a lot of things you could do to be creative there when you don't have capital to start out.
And from your experience, because I know you have a boot camp where you teach individuals about how you've been able to do it in your own life, how are most of these individuals raising capital? Is it family, friends, or is there like one in particular that seems to resonate with most of the audience you have?
Yeah, I mean, look, in the beginning, you're not raising institutional capital
Mhm.
because there are a lot of boxes you need to check to do that, right? They want to see your past deals, they want to see your track record, um, they want to see everything, right? There's a lot of compliance that goes into that when you're raising money for big institutions. So it's not going to happen out the gate. Out of the gate, really, what you're going to get is friends and family, or what I started seeing happen a lot recently is people being able to raise capital online, and just it doesn't need to be soliciting online as much as building relationships online. Um, and usually that's on social media, whether that's through Twitter, Instagram, whatever. But they're able to create those relationships if they don't have them in their day to day life, and then eventually turn those into investors.
Okay. And to that point of friends and families, when I was reading, you talked about like that first deal, realistic numbers. You're not going to make that much money. I think I don't know if you made money, if that. Um, Kind of just setting the expectation for people. At least from my point of view, a lot of people want to get into real estate, but they're kind of tentative. They're just like, oh, I'm not sure if it's the right time in the market. Can you just touch up on like real expectations for someone on their first deal to help them kind of launch pad into buying multiple properties?
Definitely. I mean, what I would say is so take a step back, I guess. People look at it the complete wrong way, right? They look at buying real estate as they're buying one property. And really what you're doing is you're starting a business. And if you were starting any other business, you wouldn't expect to make a ton of money in your first month of opening the business, right? That'd be insane. Right.
Right.
For real estate, for some reason, people think they're going to make a ton of money on their first deal. And you can do very well on your first deal. But the thing to keep in mind is you're going to grow so much that the money you make on your first deal will almost become irrelevant. And to give an example, right, that first deal I did, it was 200K triplex. I obviously owned a smaller piece of it, but the total profit in the deal was 55K, right? And that was pretty good. We did that. It ended up being a like 26% IRR or something like that because with leverage. Um, so pretty good in under 2 years. And I would say a realistic goal for your smaller deals that are under a million is a 1.5 to 2x in like a year or two. That's realistic.
Mhm,
It's not going to happen every deal, but you can do it if you're good. Once you get to the bigger deal sizes, though, the smaller deals you did become irrelevant, right? I've scaled up from doing 200K deals to $20 million deals. And if I did the worst $20 million deal in the world, I would make more money than if I did the best 200K deal in the world. So like people get they're so focused on that first deal when it's just going to be irrelevant. Like 2 years from now, say you do a triplex as your first deal, then your next deal is 10 units, then 20 units. On a 20 unit deal, you can do a horrible deal and make more than you would on your first triplex. So you have to think of it as you're growing a business versus doing one deal. And with any other business, you realize that and say, all right, the money I make in the first month is going to be so small compared to what I'm making 3 years from now. And I think people need to look at real estate the same way.
okay. So it's more so you're just trying to build that credibility and figure out how you can maybe make as much profit on that property as possible to then keep scaling from there?
You're doing a few things. One is you're establishing relationships. That's with investors, it's with brokers who are sending you the deals, it's with lenders who are lending on the deals. So you're getting all those relationships set up on your first couple deals. Um, and that leads to a lot of things down the road, right? Obviously the availability of capital, but also people sending you off market deals that are very good and aren't available to other investors. Um, the second thing is the knowledge. It all compounds, right? Once you start having properties that you own in a market, you actually have inside information, right? You can't do that in the
Mhm.
public markets, but in the private markets, you can have inside information. It's not illegal. So you can know exactly what rents are, how long it takes to lease up, what tenant improvements cost. All those things are not really readily available to outside investors who don't own the market. So you start having an edge pretty quickly. Um, and it all kind of grows with you.
And to that point of insider information, obviously that would benefit yourself to make the most amount of money possible. When reading one of your articles, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you said that a lot of people get so fixated on real estate as a way to make money through like appreciation versus actually incrementally increasing, I think it was the rent on the tenants, and this is the true way to generate a huge return in real estate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that out of base there?
Yeah. So basically, what you want to think about is everyone thinks that real estate is like the stock market, right? Where you put money in and then it either goes up or it goes down. And that's not how it works, right? It's a private asset that you control, and that's the benefit of it. When you're investing in the S&P 500, right? You sometimes you do well with the market, and other times you don't, but you're not in control of that return.
Mhm.
In real estate, what I like to say is like there's no such thing as real estate returns. There are your returns in real estate. You are buying the specific deal, you're operating it. If you have bad returns, it's not the market's fault; it's your fault. So basically, what you
Mhm.
want to do is you want to get away from the perspective of, oh, I make money when real estate appreciates, to I'm going to go in there, force the appreciation, and then get a capital event, whether that's a sale or a refinance. And when you do it that way, you have a ton of control over it, and you should be realistically outperforming the S&P by a pretty wide margin.
And I mean, this might be a dumb question, but how do you identify how much to increase the rent by? Is it just based off like inflation, or how do you go about that?
No, it's so like it almost has nothing to do with inflation. It's all about where the market is, right? So if you look at, let's say you're buying a deal and it's a 10 unit deal, rents are currently 800, but you look at all the comps and they're at 1,000, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't, you can get them up to 1,000 then because all the nearby comps are renting for that price. It's just supply and demand. So you'd be able to increase rents 200 in that case. In a different scenario, right? Let's say you're currently rents are 400 and market rents are 1,000. You'd be able to increase it 600. And I think people have this mental block where they're like, oh, you can't increase rents X%, but you can increase them however much you want to get to market, right? If you had a vacant unit, you'd be able to increase that $1,000 to get to market. So you basically, what you have to do is look at the comps, and the comps will tell you where you can actually raise rents to. It's not going to be driven based on inflation or anything like that. It's just based on the local supply and demand.
And to that point about supply and demand in markets with real estate, are you fixated specifically on, like, let's say different cities generate a completely different return? To give you an example, in Miami, which is where I'm from, the real estate market obviously has gone up significantly. And I think even if you compare it relative to other large cities, I think it's gone up a fair amount. Is there still, I guess, potential to make money in a market like that where the properties have just skyrocketed?
Look, there's always potential to make money. There are certain markets that are harder than others, right? And the way I like to compare it is, let's say you want to play one-on-one basketball, right? And you can choose anyone in the world and you want to beat them. You wouldn't choose LeBron
Mhm.
James, right? It'd be
Right,
stupid. And a lot of people,
right,
what they do is they choose LeBron James. Like, why would I invest in Manhattan against the best real estate investors in the world when I can invest in the middle of nowhere or in a secondary market or tertiary market that still has great um, market dynamics, but has way less competition. So I think a lot of people just like play it on hard mode for no reason. Like there's no reason to put yourself at a spot to compete against 10,000 of the best investors in the world when you can go somewhere else and compete against a bunch of idiots.
okay. So in this analogy, playing against a junior varsity basketball player would be like instead of trying to build a real estate portfolio in Miami, maybe going some like suburb somewhere else. Is that kind of my understanding?
Yeah, I mean, where I started out, it was all tertiary markets. So some of my best deals have been in towns of 20,000 people, pretty small. A lot of the markets I'm in now are a little bit bigger, kind of Sunbelt growth markets. But in general, like, would I ever even spend time in Manhattan? Like, no. Would I spend time in LA? No. Miami, there's some outlying areas I think you can make the argument, but like downtown Miami, no. Like a lot of that stuff is just, there's no reason to put yourself in that position when you could just compete against people who aren't that smart somewhere else.
Right. And I think this question I want to get that out there before I forgot because I'd probably get pitchforks thrown at me. For buying versus renting, you made a video. I saw the analysis you did and comparing it, so I kind of know the answer. But for the audience itself, you have a huge portfolio of properties, but from my understanding, currently it seems like not a wise decision to buy the property you live in. Why is that the case?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a big difference between buying a multifamily property where the tenants are paying you rent and a single family home where you're just basically eating maintenance costs. Um,
Mhm.
and basically, the video I did, which you can look at on my YouTube, uh, showed a $1.7 million house in Connecticut versus a comparable rental in Connecticut. And I forgot what the exact number was. It was like $11 million difference
Yeah,
it,
11 versus 4.
over 30 years. And basically, the
Mhm.
reason for that is you can take, let's say, with the down payment, right? You can take that money and put it into, I use the S&P 500. Realistically, I would invest that into multifamily real estate myself. But just for other people, I put the S&P 500 and 10% return over 30 years. And then there's not only that, where you have the down payment versus putting in the market versus putting in a house, but you also have the every single year. People don't realize how expensive it is for property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and given where rates are, your mortgage. So almost every year, you basically save another 100 grand by
Right.
renting versus buying, and you could also invest that into the market. So it's such a large number that over the course of 30 years, if you just got a 10% return on all that additional capital, I believe it was an $11 million difference versus owning the home, which I would assume went up 3% a year. So it really makes no sense. I think values are extremely elevated. But I was calculating it; it looked like they needed to go down 40% or so for it to really even out. I don't think they're going to go down that much. I don't think there's going to be a crazy drop or anything like that. I just don't think it makes sense to buy right now if you're in an expensive area.
And the logic to add on, just to kind of like walk through it, you're basically saying if you just rent for 30 years, invest the difference that you're saving from the taxes, insurance, interest into like an index fund, S&P 500, whatever, you have 11 mil. At that point in time, you could just buy a property worth around 4 million and then you have that difference that you would have not had otherwise. That's kind of
I mean, the
the
difference is
logic.
it was even larger because basically it was 11 million was the actual like total difference because
Yep.
it was netting out because if you invested all that money, it'd be around 15 million. The house would be worth around four, so it would net out to 11. It's honestly nowhere close, right? Like I would say if the difference was $2 or $3 million over 30 years, you'd say okay, like I'd probably bite the bullet, buy the house, and you enjoy living in the house. When it's 11 million bucks, it's kind of just a waste of money at that point.
No, I hear you. Yeah, I remember you said something about like premium of obviously like the benefits of living in the same place for a certain amount of time, but when the difference is that much, it's like doesn't really make sense. Um, I want to get to another point here, and I think this is a very big key thing here. For a lot of these deals, you talk about investors finding those right connections. You had that article on creating your own yacht in terms of like network. How have you been able to create your network in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is social media is really, really powerful. Um, and I have, I don't know how many followers I have on Twitter now. It's probably around 140,000. But I think that's a very easy way to create a very important network. It used to cost a lot of money to create a network. Now you just post for free on social media and you can create one. So that's the first thing. Um, Second thing is I think it's very important to have places where you can kind of bring people to you. For me, I belong to a golf club and I'm always able to invite people. And it kind of just like, one, it's really nice to do. Two, it kind of sets everything on your own terms. And three, people are kind of grateful for it and invite you to something else afterward. So that's one of the biggest things I've done. I love golfing anyway. So it's just for me, I get to do something I enjoy while meeting new people. And that's been really good to grow the network.
And to that point, you wrote like your uncle talked to you and preached to you about like spending pretty much all not all your money, but a lot of your money to reinvest it in yourself and spend it on, let's say, like a golf membership. But you also touched up on something super real, which I don't see often, where it's like trying to find your own tribe in a sense. Can you kind of elaborate on that? Because I think it's truly important of trying to find like the right setting for each individual.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people are delusional about this and they
Yeah,
think that everyone should accept them in the same way. When that's obviously not the case, right? Some people are going to like you more than other people will.
for
Perfect example is like President of the United States, 50% of the country hates him at any given point. So like you're never going to win over the people who don't like you. And
sure.
it's way easier to just find someone who is predisposed to like you and have them like you a little more than win over someone who already doesn't like you.
Mhm,
And I think people are delusional about this, and you really want to find places, and there are, right? Whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a bar, club, country club, golf club, whatever you want to call it, where you drive with people and maybe the same interests, maybe the same shared background, whatever it is. But it makes no sense to be running around in places where you don't drive with the clientele, right? You're not going to create a network like
right. And for your case, right, you have a golf club membership, you have a big presence on social media. How do these two intertwine? Is it more so the social media gives you more authority and social proof, and that you could leverage that within conversations within the golf club, or are you actually getting deals from Twitter, or it's a little bit of both?
I actually keep them completely separate. So like no one I'm anonymous on Twitter. I never
Right,
share with people and I know in my life. So they're pretty separate. I would say they both serve similar functions. It's generally obviously given the anonymity on Twitter. I generally create like probably deeper relationships in real life just by virtue of being there, obviously. But
for sure.
they serve the same function. You end up meeting a ton of people. The reach is obviously bigger on social media than it is in person. I mean, I would never be in a room with 140,000 people in real life,
Mhm.
but I enjoy them both equally.
And another point that you made too, which again, like the articles were super good. Sorry to keep chiming in on these, but you also talked about how, like, just putting yourself out there in different situations is super key. Like, you don't wanna be that guy on the train just with the headphones on, listening to Lil Wayne and not, talking to people, figuring that out. How big is that? Like, I think most people kinda miss this out. Everyone wants to just get rich remotely and, work their office at home every single day. Like, how big is this for people to understand?
It's pretty big. I mean, you have to talk to people, right? And in order to do that, you need to be somewhat available. And like I said, I think it's the big mistake people make. They're on their commute in the morning, whatever. They're on the train, bus, and car, whatever it is. And if you're projecting the image that you don't want anyone to talk to you, whether you have your headphones in or you're just kind of slouching and whatever, no one's going to talk to you. And you kind of the point I really make with this stuff is luck is not something that just happens, right? It's conferred by another individual. When you say like, "Oh, I got this new job," or "Oh, I learned this new investment," a lot of times it's because you talked to someone, right? They conferred that luck to you. So you need to find in order to find people who are able to confer luck, you need to actually find people. And the average person just doesn't meet anyone new in their day to day lives, right? They're just head down, not talking to people. They're on their phone, they're listening to music, whatever it is. And if you're not talking to people, nothing's going to happen. So obviously there are stages that if you're sitting at home alone watching Netflix, that's going to be the worst. But if you're out in public, you want to be talking to people. And some classic examples, like my gym has a sauna. If you just say hi in the sauna, you'd be surprised how many people talk to you and end up creating a relationship, even though you're in there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is. So like it's simple things like that that can actually create pretty important relationships. I met a few brokers in there who've sent me some off market deals, just random things like that. Some investors, you never know if like you go in there and just like talk a little bit. It's pretty easy. And it goes for anything, right? It could be sitting down at lunch. You could be anywhere.
No, I really resonate with that. In my own life, I've seen that. Like the job that I currently have, I got it through one of my best friends that I met in a honor society in university. Different things that I invested in, whether it was like Bitcoin at a certain point, like it was all through just like genuine connections with people. And I think like so many people just really miss this out. Like they're just not kind of tapped into that. To that point, right? To for the average individual, I want to make this really relevant for them. They have a W-2 job, they're making 50K. You spoke about this very well in an article of how to maximize the opportunity to make money. But you talked about this one piece which I want to dive into, which is like door-to-door sales. Talk to me a little bit about this, your logic behind that. Why should someone do this if they're in a place where they're not making too much?
Yeah, yeah. And what I would say is there are different levels to it. The article is obviously really long, but
Yeah.
if you let's just say you're down on your luck, right? You have nothing going for you. You're in a tough spot. I think door to door sales is incredible. And the reason for that is because most businesses, when you have a salesperson, right, they're kind of taking in inbound leads. So, like, let's just say you're a HVAC company, right? Someone calls you up, you answer the phone, and you try and close them, or you go out in person to try and close them. That's an
Mm,
inbound lead. And that's valuable to a company to be able to close an inbound lead. When you're doing door to door sales, you're actually bringing in a new lead they never had. So it's an outbound lead. And that is the most difficult thing for any business to accomplish. So if you're able to do that, you get paid extremely well. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important. I actually run a home service businesses too, but the if anyone can bring in for any business, and could be home service, it could be a real estate deal, right? If you come to me and say, "Hey, I found a $10 million off market deal," like you're going to get paid a lot of money for that, right? Because you're generating revenue that no one else knew existed. And it's the same thing with door to door sales. So you have the benefit of one, being able to bring in those leads, and two, you can create a business around that, right? If you're the one who's generating all the revenue, it's pretty easy for you to step off and just now create a business that's bringing in those leads for free, right? Which is a huge edge. Most businesses pay a ton of money to bring in leads. So I think things like that are actually very important. I think another example would be like affiliate marketers. It's the same thing where they're able to bring in leads that no one else knew existed. Two highly valuable skill sets. I'd say affiliate marketing is a significantly more valuable skill set just because you can reach more people with the scale of the internet. But overall, when you have that skill set and you're able to bring in revenue that a business didn't know exist, you're going to get paid a ton of money.
yeah, I think that's very real. I think for a lot of people, their ego kind of gets in the way of potentially doing those type of jobs. Is there? I mean, I could see maybe someone that's maybe working in private equity to then go to door, maybe to get back into that, be a little bit more difficult. I guess is there any negative downside of doing this type of job, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say if you're in private equity, I definitely wouldn't do door to door. At that point, I would start my own business or buy a business, which is sort of what I did. I was in private equity. But if if you're kind of in, like I said, those lower level jobs where you don't have as much going for you, you want to increase your income really quickly. I mean, door to door salespeople can make 300K to $1 million a year if they're really good. Obviously, it takes a year or two to get there, but still. Um, the downside is that it's not seen as prestigious, so there aren't really any exit opportunities afterward aside from staying in sales or creating your own business around your skill set. Um, so there is definitely downside to it, but I think it's a very viable option for people who don't see a good path in front of them.
Okay, so the idea is, make this money a fair share amount, and then start figuring out how they could build equity. Um, Obviously, in your case, real estate, maybe some investments and like index funds and things of that sort. Can you talk to me a little bit about your boot camp? And I want to add this as well, like for the context for the people that are watching this. I think real estate is important to understand because like you mentioned the article about starting your own business and trying to go from like A to B and getting new leads is probably one of the hardest things. And with real estate, it's this thing where if you have a property, you everyone needs to live somewhere. So you kind of resolve that issue. Talk to me a little bit what you do to help people out in getting into this real estate game.
Yeah, I mean, so I have a boot camp. I've been running it for a few years at this point. It's worked extremely well. We have between 25 million and $50 million of closed deals. Um, so it's worked really well. And basically, what we do is we take you from scratch. The first 4 weeks are taking you from scratch to a very good real estate investor, right? Preparing you to buy your own deals. And the last 4 weeks are focused on you finding a deal, right? So we're out in the market. And I think that's the most important part because what people struggle with is they don't have a good feedback loop, right? They look at
Mhm.
a deal and they're like, oh, I'm not really sure if this deal works. And they don't really know how to handle it with the brokers. They don't know how to fully underwrite it. And basically, what we do is we help you through that process and help you iterate. And that's what's missing, I think, from a lot of different programs or whatever it is online is the money's made in iteration in any business. So the first deal you look at is not going to work. I can tell you that for a fact, right? It's not
Yeah.
going to pencil. So you need to basically have someone with you saying, okay, here's how to iterate. Here's what you're missing. Here's how we can help. Here's how you can avoid the mistakes. And that's basically what we do. And it's why it's been so successful. So it's extremely hands on. It's one on one with me or my business partner. And we guarantee that we work with you until you find a deal, which is pretty crazy. So it's been really successful mainly because it's so hands on and mainly because we do allow that iteration to occur, which is the most important part of any business.
Amazing, man. Well, real estate god, I really appreciate your insight, your wisdom today. Thank you again for your time, man.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Happy to be on here and have a great rest of your day.